What's up and welcome to XD Tutorials. So today we're going to be looking at a little bit of scripting, and we're just going to briefly look at how it works. So we did look at this before, so let's go ahead and create a new script. Right click anywhere and then go up to create and then CSharp script. I'm just going to call this one test script. And then before I double click on it, I can go up to, just to recap on this, Unity is going to do some compiling in the bottom here, but when that's done, you can go to Edit, Preferences, External Tools. You can change what you want to open Visual Studio with. Starting recently, I believe in the later versions, Unity has actually stopped using MonoDevelop as default and actually has started using Visual Studio. I think it is 2015, but it might be 2017 by default that they have implemented. Visual Studio is free to get though, and it is a very useful tool. You can also use other things as well that's not Visual Studio if you wanted to, but this is where you can go ahead and change that. And it does take some time to launch, but it is a lot better of a tool. So now you have your editor selected, double click on it on your script, and it will take some time to open up in Visual Studio. And then you'll get your basic script with a bunch of basic information. So let's go ahead and first see how this works. Let's go ahead and create a variable here. Public float speed. I'm going to set that to 5 by default, and then I'm going to just an update transform dot translate transform dot forward times speed times time dot delta time. So I'll break this all down in a second. I just want to show you exactly how scripting kind of works in Unity. So if I go ahead and create a cube, and also every time that you do create a script to make any changes, normally Unity will end up having to compile, and you can see that in the bottom right when that little circle is there. If it's not, everything should be good to go. So I go to game object, 3D object, cube. I go ahead and create a cube. I go to the inspector for this cube. Let me go ahead and find this in the scene view. There it is. I can add this script by just dragging it onto this object here, or I can click on add component, and I can go down to scripts, and then I can add my script here as well. Or I can also just search for it and add it that way as well if I wanted to. So once the script is on here though, I'll see my script. I can disable it if I wanted to, or enable it and keep it on. If I hit play, then this object should basically move in a direction. And it does. Now I can also alter that speed during runtime. So if I go ahead and focus on this object here, I can actually alter the speed and make it slower or faster, or I can full on stop it. That's what the inspector can allow me to do with scripts. I can kind of edit public variables, or at least most public variables. This will also work if I have multiple objects. So if I go ahead and create another cube, 3D object cube, and I add the script to this, I can also drag it onto the object itself. I don't have to actually go through the inspector, but I normally like to go through the inspector just to make sure it's there. If I add the object there, this object will also start moving, but they're moving at the same speed. But I can make this 20, for example. Now this one is moving at the speed of 5, and this one is moving at the speed of 20. They both have the exact same script on them, but they're both having different information passed into them, and they're both working independently of each other. So they're not kind of all working off of the same thing, which is how Unity's model works, which is why it's called our mono behavior setup, is because everything is mono as in one, so everything is kind of independent on its own, which means that everything also is kind of instantiated a little bit weirdly, or at least created a little bit weirdly, in a sense that because everything is one thing that's from a base thing, then you can have many one things that's all from the same base thing, and you can create your own base thing. That sounds a little bit weird and complex, but basically it's the idea that, for example, I can go to game object here and I can create a 3D object and a cube. I can rename this cube to, for example, player. I can rename this cube to something like enemy, and I can zoom into both of them and move them around. Let me just go ahead and do that real quick. Where's the other one? So, wow, where's the other cube? There it is. So, I can move them around. They can all be moved independently. For example, I'm only just moving this cube around, and this cube is staying exactly where it is. They're both cubes. They both have the exact same information on them. There's literally nothing different about them aside from their location right now. So they're both cubes. They both have the same information. One has a script on it, the other one doesn't. That's really the only difference for the most part. And they all derive from the same thing. That thing is a cube. However, they can all be different cubes in a way. For example, I can also create a material. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to call this one red and set the color just to red. I'm going to throw it onto this object for enemy, I guess. So they're the exact same object. The difference is they both derive from a cube. They're both, the thing that they are from is a cube, but they are both fundamentally different in the sense that this is now a red cube with a test script on it at a different position than this white cube without a test script on it at a different position. But they are both still, at the end of the day, cubes. So they're both still the same thing, but because of that model, they kind of all, you can kind of create a lot of different things all from the base thing. So the base thing is the cube in this case. So let's go ahead and break down a blank script. Well, let's actually break down this code first, and then we'll break down a blank script. So this is basically a public field where I can see what I want a value to be. Now this is going to be my default value. So if I don't set a value in Unity, if I don't set a value in Unity, by default it's going to be 5. And if I go ahead and change that and then right click on the script and go to reset, it will go back to all of its default values. Then in update, we'll just translate moving the object from its forward position, which is the z-axis for that object, the blue arrow here, in its forward position over the course of speed. So whatever speed we set in the inspector, not in the script itself. And then we're just going to do that over delta time, so it's kind of smooth over the course of about 1 second. So let's break down a blank script. So this is what you get when you start Unity, or when you start a new script. You get the name of your script. It will always derive from MonoBehavior, and they will always have these 3 usings. 2 of them will always be kind of gray, and the last one will always be kind of white. Then you'll always get a start function and an update function. We'll be going more in depth in functions and variables and things like that a little bit later, but just to break down what Unity gives you. Using Unity Engine is kind of required when you have a MonoBehavior, because Unity Engine is obviously the thing that you're in, so that's going to allow it to be able to be attached to the inspector and have information that basically Unity can read. These kind of functions and things are Unity specific functions. So MonoBehavior is what's going to allow you to add this object to the inspector, actually add it to the inspector, see information from the inspector, and use functions that are specific to Unity. Now you get this start function, which means at the beginning, anything you type in here will happen first. Once the game actually starts up and the script is on, then this information will all get called. Then you have update, which is for every single frame. If we look back at our game window here and click on stats, if I hit play, we'll see our frame rate over here, and it's constantly changing. So for example, if I pause it, at this very specific frame we have 86 frames, so 86 times it's very possible that this function can run up to 86 times. This is per frame. So for every frame, whatever is in here is going to get called. So basically what calling is basically it's how Unity is going to, it's another word to say that this code is going to be ran in sequential order, or this code is going to be ran in order from top to bottom kind of thing. So if I had some code here and then some more code here, it's going to be ran in the order of from the top and then the next line, and then exits the function and moves on. We'll be breaking this down a little bit later in the next video, actually.